Cruises were supposed to be relaxing, weren't they? When I booked the week-long trip through the Caribbean, I was desperate for a break. Long days at work and mounting stress had taken their toll, and the promise of endless blue seas and all-you-can-eat buffets sounded like paradise. The ship was called Elysium, a towering monstrosity of white metal and glass that seemed to glitter under the sun as I boarded. Everything about it was luxurious, from the marble floors in the lobby to the sprawling pool deck. The crew was all smiles, and my fellow passengers were just as eager as I was. The first few days were uneventful, exactly what I wanted. I slept in, lounged by the pool, and gorged myself on shrimp cocktail. But on the fourth night, things started to feel off. It began with the horizon. I woke up at 3 a.m., the kind of jarring wakefulness where you know you're not falling back asleep anytime soon. My cabin felt stifling, so I decided to take a walk on the promenade deck. The ship swayed gently beneath my feet as I stepped outside into the cool night air. The sea was calm, but the horizon, it wasn't right. There was no separation between sea and sky, just an endless stretch of gray that seemed to bleed together. The moon was nowhere to be seen, and the stars had vanished. Felt like we were floating in a void. I tried to shrug it off, convincing myself it was just a trick of the light or fatigue. But as I stood there, I heard a soft, rhythmic tapping behind me. Tap, tap, tap. I turned, expecting to see another passenger, but the deck was empty. The sound grew louder, closer, like it was coming from right behind me. My skin prickled, and I bolted back to my cabin, slamming the door shut behind me. The next morning, I told myself it was a dream. Yet, as I walked through the ship, I started noticing things. Little things. The crew avoided eye contact, their once friendly smiles now stiff and forced. Some of the passengers seemed different, distant. There was a man I had shared drinks with on the first night, a jovial guy named Tom. But now, his face was pale, his eyes sunken, and he didn't seem to recognize me at all. At dinner, I overheard whispers. People were talking about strange noises at night, about doors that wouldn't open or close, about missing passengers. A woman at my table mentioned seeing a figure standing at the edge of the pool at midnight, staring into the water before vanishing. That night, the tapping returned. Tap, tap, tap. It was outside my cabin door. I froze in bed, clutching the sheets to my chest, every muscle in my body tense. The sound didn't stop. Gathering every ounce of courage I had, I crept toward the door and peered through the peephole. There was nothing there. But when I opened the door, I saw wet footprints leading down the hallway, disappearing around the corner. The next morning, I tried to report it to the crew, but they brushed me off, saying it was probably just a prank. Frustrated, I decided to explore the ship, hoping to find some kind of logical explanation for everything. That's when I found the stairwell. It wasn't on the map, tucked away behind a door labeled "Crew Only." I don't know what compelled me to open it, but as I descended the narrow, rusted steps, the air grew colder, heavier. At the bottom was a long, dimly lit corridor that didn't match the sleek design of the rest of the ship. The walls were metal, streaked with rust and something darker. The smell of salt and decay was overwhelming. At the end of the hallway was a door, slightly ajar. As I approached, I heard whispers, dozens of voices all speaking at once. I pushed the door open, and my blood turned to ice. Inside was a room filled with pictures, hundreds of them, pinned to the walls. They were all of passengers, some smiling and carefree, others looking terrified. In the center of the room was a table with a single photo on it. It was me. A loud bang echoed behind me, and the door slammed shut. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening, and the room began to spin. I stumbled back, tripping over something on the floor. When I looked down, I saw a pile of wet footprints leading in every direction. I don't remember how I got back to my cabin. The next thing I knew, it was morning, and the ship's intercom announced our arrival at the final port. I practically ran off the ship, not bothering to wait for the formalities. When I looked back at Elysium from the dock, it seemed different. The sleek, pristine exterior was gone, replaced by rust and grime. The windows were dark, and I could swear I saw faces staring back at me, their hollow eyes following me as I walked away. I never found out what happened to the others on that cruise. When I tried to look up Elysium later, there was no record of the ship ever existing. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear that tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap. I had always dreamed of going on a cruise, and when I finally had the chance, I jumped at it. It was the Ocean Serenade, a massive luxury ship with everything you could imagine. Fine dining, pools, casinos, and even a small movie theater. I was traveling alone, hoping for some time to unwind and maybe meet new people. The first 2 days were perfect. I spent my mornings by the pool, my afternoons exploring the ship, and my evenings enjoying the live music performances. But on the third night, something changed. It started with a strange announcement over the intercom just as I was settling into bed. The captain's voice crackled. "Attention passengers, due to unforeseen circumstances, please remain in your cabins until further notice." It struck me as odd, but I assumed it was a technical issue or some weather-related precaution. I was about to drift off to sleep when I heard it, a faint tapping at my door. "Housekeeping," I called out, but there was no response. I peeked through the peephole. The hallway was dimly lit, and no one was there. Shaking it off as my imagination, I climbed back into bed. But the tapping returned, louder this time. It wasn't just a knock. It was rhythmic, almost deliberate. I swung the door open, ready to confront whoever was messing with me. But again, the hallway was empty. That's when I noticed something odd. The lights in the hallway were flickering, and the air felt heavy, like the aftermath of a storm. Then I saw it. At the far end of the corridor, a figure stood completely still. It was a woman in an old-fashioned dress, her back to me. Her hair was drenched, water pooling beneath her feet. "Hello," I called out, but she didn't move. A chill ran down my spine. I slammed the door and locked it, my heart racing. I told myself it was some kind of elaborate prank or a guest in costume, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The next morning, the announcement came again. Same monotone voice. "Attention passengers, remain in your cabins until further notice." I decided to ignore it. I couldn't stay locked up any longer. When I stepped out, the ship was eerily quiet. No staff, no passengers, just rows of closed doors. As I wandered, I noticed wet footprints leading down the hallway. They stopped abruptly at a cabin door, room 13. I knocked, hoping for some answers. The door creaked open on its own, revealing a cabin in complete disarray. Furniture overturned, water dripping from the ceiling, and a strange, salty stench in the air. Then I saw the mirror on the wall. Words were scrawled across it in what looked like seaweed. "You shouldn't have come." I bolted out of there, but as I turned the corner, I froze. The woman from the hallway was standing there again, her head tilted to the side, her eyes hollow and black. She opened her mouth, and a gurgling sound, like drowning, filled the air. I ran, not knowing where I was going, just desperate to get away. The corridors seemed endless, twisting and turning in ways that didn't make sense. I found myself at the main dining hall, but it was empty except for one table set for a feast. Plates were piled high with food, but everything was rotting. Fish with milky eyes, bread covered in mold. And at the head of the table sat the woman. She stared at me, and for the first time she spoke. "You're already dead." I backed away, my mind spinning. Suddenly, I felt the ship lurch violently, as if it had struck something. Alarms blared, and water began flooding the room. I tried to run, but the water rose too quickly. Just as it reached my chin, everything went black. I woke up gasping for air, back in my cabin. It was as if nothing had happened. My clothes were dry, the lights were steady, and the intercom was silent. But when I opened the door, the ship was empty, completely abandoned. No passengers, no crew, no sounds except the creaking of the hull and the distant crash of waves. I ran to the deck, hoping to see land or another ship, but the horizon stretched endlessly in every direction. And there, Carved into the railing were the words, "The ocean takes its own." I've been drifting for days now, or at least it feels like days. The food never runs out, but I don't feel hunger anymore. The woman appears every night, her gurgling laugh haunting me. If you're reading this and ever board the Ocean Serenade, know this: it's not a ship, it's a tomb, and once you're on it, you never leave.